Good evening and welcome. We're going to discuss today a little bit on organizational communication. Would be a great introduction so that we can all get just not only familiar with the class but familiar with each other. My name is Orestes. Hope I'll be a great host for you this week. Music's a bit loud there, but we're going to roll with this. Alright, so there's some topics that I want to make sure we discuss. We'll go kind of in depth, make sure that we have a good understanding. My goal in this lecture, I want to start there, is to come out of it with a different perspective on the course that we're beginning here in regards to organizational communication. Alright, jumping into it, the first topic that I'd like to discuss and I found very interesting was the way that we use communication to create the truth in an organizational setting. What I mean by this is in relaying messages, right? And asking somebody to complete a task and letting somebody know to follow up on a certain task. That is what's next. That is the next fact. That is the truth. That is what creates action, and that is what leads to an effective organizational structure, effective communication in an organization. Those truths, whether they be right or wrong, is something that I think is key and important here. Right? Whether they're right or wrong, these form the next steps. These form the next part of the process, the next piece of the puzzle, and that's what organizations are all about, getting somewhere. Okay? This is something that I want to note is very different, for example, in a structured corporate setting where a lot has been tinkered with, everything is kind of set, standardized as to how things should be done, right? This is very different in a corporate setting than a startup. I've had personal experience working in both settings, and currently in a startup setting where everything is kind of hectic, nothing is set in stone. There's kind of this feeling where anybody can contribute, right? Everybody should contribute to make the new organization that is growing, and everybody's kind of unsure how to grow this, how exactly things should be done. That sensation, although it might sound more hectic and unclear in an organizational setting, can lead to some really effective action, because instead of just being told, accepting the fact for what it is, you have to think for yourself. You have to make things happen on your own, and that's something that I think is really valuable when a group of people can think on their own but still come to effective action as a whole, right? In regards to how people interact is the next topic that I want to discuss. These social relations, right? The human relations that we share is something that I was surprised to learn about, especially, for example, through the Hawthorne studies that were discussed a while back in the modules. In the Hawthorne studies, to explain briefly, um, I definitely recommend going back to the module if you missed it. Every time that the lights were, for example, made really bright inside of the factory, production levels spiked, but eventually flattened and went back to normal. The lights were made dimmer, complete opposite action. The effect was the same, exact same, where production spiked, things were shaken up, but eventually things leveled off again, back to normal, back to business as usual. I related with this quite a bit because, for example, the excitement of a new job, a promotion, where you're just learning about your role and how you're going to make a huge difference, and you have so many big plans and goals. But let's say a year or two into it, you get into this monotony, right? You start doing the same repetition, you're not being challenged anymore. That change, that paying attention to the groups, the organizational pieces of the whole, that leads to great push to make sure that the organization can continue to be effective, right? I think that's something that it's a simple thought experiment. The Hawthorne studies that were studied for quite a long time, at least a couple of decades, but led to an important realization of how organizational communication and the dynamics of the organization, how these work. Okay, in regards to dynamics, I also wanted to highlight, any balance is important, right? But I want to highlight the balance of creativity and constraint as imperative for both innovation and productivity. What I mean by this is that innovation is how things move forward, how great things happen, right? I definitely believe in this, and also realize that to have creativity, um, there are constraints that are necessary on the other hand. Um, the constraints being guidelines as to what you're going to do with that innovation, guidelines for innovation that can lead to things actually getting done. It's not creativity for the sake of creativity and artistry, but in an organization, you usually have a goal, and you might even have deadlines, and those constraints, such as deadlines, is a great example actually, are very necessary to make sure that you're achieving those goals in a creative fashion. And sometimes creativity is necessary to meet the constraints of a deadline, such as when you know that you only have 3 days to mount a tremendous project and make sure that everything gets completed to standard. You have to get innovative, and that creativity comes into place. The balance of these is so important, and I really appreciated that I wanted to highlight this for our group here. Go Las Vegas 51s. Okay, last topic that I want to discuss, I think is really interesting, and I had a really neat thought that I wanted to share. The scientific management. This form of organizational communication has the benefit of being dynamic, being adaptable, and just like in any scientific process, you try something, you have a hypothesis of how you think that'll go, but you don't know until you give it a shot and you try it and test it, and then you go back and you revise as to what can be done better. I think this is amazing for organizational improvement, right? Making sure that you're getting to that goal and achieving what an organization has come together to do. This also made me think, weirdly enough, of a hard science, biology, and it helped me assimilate and understand organization as an organism. And bear with me here. The same way that organs make up an organism, everything has to be going pretty well. There's definitely key organs that need to be functioning for your body to be in good shape. It made me think that in an organization, there's all these individuals that form part of the living, growing, always changing, very dynamic thing, and that thing is the organization. And all those whole, for example, the individuals that make the teams, that make departments, all feed and create the whole of the organization, which I'm assimilating to be the body. As organs create body, a living thing, individuals, teams, departments create an organization that is constantly changing as the parts change, right? But the same way that a body, an animal, a person has the will to continue surviving as the goal, an organization has that same will to continue surviving even when things get tough, even when times get hard, and figure out ways to get better. I think that was a really interesting thought that came just from learning about scientific management, and I hope that's something that's relatable. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Best of luck in this course and in college. See you guys next time.